Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Gentro podcast. Today's podcast episode is one that is near and dear to my heart because it's about a topic that I truly care about a lot. And our guest today is Walt Laskos. He is a credit union industry communications and public relations veteran and educator of more than 20 years. Today, he is the CEO and owner of Laskos Communications, an independent consultancy specializing in the prevention of financial scams and fraud targeting older adults. If you want more information on this topic after the episode concludes, you can go to his website, laskoscommunications.com, which will provide many more details on his background and the services he provides. Walt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
So right off the bat, why don't you give us a little more information on who you are, how you got involved in the credit unions, and more specifically, how you found yourself as one of the first lines of defense against frauds and scams.
Well, Jacob, I guess you could say it probably started, more than 40 years ago. Unfortunately, I'm sounding like a dinosaur. When I really started to get involved in the communications and PR profession, I really believe that beyond marketing and advertising, a whole focus on communicating the values of an organization and what that organization stands for, and also helping to develop the perception, the public image of that organization is very important. And I've done that through the course of a variety of jobs I had, but it was around probably the year 2000 when I became involved with credit unions. I was living in California at the time and began my credit union career at Western Corporate Federal Credit Union in San Dimas, which is just outside of Los Angeles, and spent about 10 years there working as Director of Public Relations. During that period of time, I really got to know what credit unions are, what they stand for, what they espouse. I mean, they are built on a cooperative financial, operational platform defined by 7 cooperative principles. And essentially it comes down to as those that participate as members of the credit union, of the corporate credit union, they all have a vote in determining its outcome and its operations, things of that sort. But during that time, I also was able to harness more of my background as a credit union development educator, going through a certification program with the National Trade Association that served credit unions. But it came around the year, I guess you could say 2000, or rather not in 2000, but 2010. I remember around 2008, 2009, we started going into that Great Recession, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And bingo, it just like the floor was pulled out by so many people because of all the losses. And unfortunately, our corporate credit union was placed in conservatorship. And at that point, I lost my job. And I wound up then going into a freelance mode, living in California. I did a lot of work with banks and credit unions and others on the side of public relations and communications work. But that really set the whole foundation for working with credit unions in what I do today, and really led up to what I do today.
Mm-hmm. When was it that you first kind of discovered that these scams and elder fraud was becoming a growing issue, leading up to the grand scale issue that it is today?
Well, fortunate for me, I mentioned losing my job back during the Great Recession, but then around 2014 it was. I came to work for a trade association in Massachusetts that served credit unions in the state as well as in the states of New Hampshire and Rhode Island. And probably around 2017, working along with our CEO, we started a program that was called CU Senior Safeguard.
Mm-hmm.
And what we wound up doing at the time is we did, first of all, did a survey of consumers to get a measurement or a benchmark about how they were being targeted about scams and fraud. And really found to our astonishment that it was like a major issue. We then did a partnership with EverFi and put together this program, CU Senior Safeguard, which was a two-pronged approach to addressing the problem. One aspect of this program, Senior Safeguard, focused on staff at credit unions. It trained them to learn how to recognize the signs of someone coming into a branch that might be under the pressure of a con artist, scamming them to withdraw money so that, they could then hand it over to that con artist. And this was done also in a way so that it created a barrier of defense so that we can protect those members from losing their money. As you could imagine, when someone comes into a branch and it just seems to be rather strange that this 80-year-old is looking to withdraw, $20,000 because maybe they're doing some home improvements, or they're all given now this information by the scammer, right? But as the person representing the financial institution, they learn how to ask the right questions, to pause, to try to do everything possible to help and prevent that older adult from losing that $20,000, because no one wants to see that happen.
Yeah.
And it's that older person is usually acting out of emotion or fear, and that's what drives them to be so frightened, let's say, that we have to do what I'm being told. But anyway, that was the one aspect of the program. And then the other aspect of the program of Senior Safeguard focused on consumers. And it helped folks like you and me to understand about all the different kind of scams that there are, where one could go to learn more about them, what you should do if you encounter one of these situations, provides the guidance. And it also provides guidance on if should something happen, should you be taken in a scam, where do you go? How do you report it? What happens? So like I say, that was a two-pronged approach. And since 2017, I've been really engaged with this topic, along with this CU Senior Safeguard. My boss at the time and we put together a program where we would go out to, let's say, a senior center, and we would hold an educational forum. We would bring in some other subject matter experts to answer questions, to share their guidance, help explain the topic to the seniors that were gathered there. And we brought in lawmakers and law enforcement, and it really demonstrated the credit union's desire to engage the community in this conversation, because, Jacob, one of the things that's important for credit unions is financial education. It's one of those cooperative principles. So, it becomes more incumbent upon a credit union, especially because of that principle, that they engage the community and provide these kind of educational opportunities, so that those who participate at the credit union, could be more aware of what they need to do and how to protect themselves from scams and fraud. So these panel discussions were a great way for us to engage the community, to bring together, the leaders in the community and those that are really engaged in protecting, the seniors from scams like this, and to do that kind of educational outreach. And it really, we took it on the show throughout, Massachusetts, the various locations, from the Berkshires, the Springfield, to the local area around Boston. We held them up in New Hampshire. We held them in Rhode Island, and eventually our trade association also included Delaware, and we even held them down in Delaware. As a matter of fact, back in the day, I remember doing one of those educational forums in Delaware for Dover Federal Credit Union, and we were able to bring in Chef Robert Irvine, from Dinner Impossible, and because there's a lot of military folks down in Dover, and he joined in the conversation in helping to really call attention and sensitize folks down there to become more aware of these scams and fraud and how to protect themselves.
Yeah, right off the bat, I definitely feel as if awareness is probably the number one combatant for these scams. Just having even uh, a very top level amount of education, I feel like could save a lot of people from um, the amount of damage these scams can do. And it really is a lot of damage. I want to reference, the article that you were gracious enough to write for Gentrio about these scams. And you said in the article that the scam industry is growing. You said what, $10 billion by 2025?
That's right. The Federal Trade Commission, looking back at the year 2023, basically reported that financial scams and fraud, hit over $10 billion. 10 billion with a B. A B is a buzz. A B. I mean, that's just ridiculous, and it continues to show signs of just growing out of control.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
I know
so what do folks like you and I do, or banks or credit unions or anyone, when you see something happening like this, it just, you can't sit idly by. We're in a position to do something about this. And one of the things too that's interesting, Jacob, on that topic is you talk about $10 billion lost in financial scams and fraud. We all get targeted. I'm sure you probably got scam calls. I did as well.
all
Others
the
do.
time.
But that they say that younger folks, they get scammed a lot as well, just like older folks. But the thing is, older folks lose more money because the scammers know they're older, they have a lot of savings,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more vulnerable. So they go after the older folks, and it's the older folks that lose a much more portions of their savings. In fact, some of them even all of their savings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember seeing a story about a poor woman that lost, my God, it was over like $1 million in a romance scam. And basically, it came down to where she was living in her car. She lost her house, lost everything. And if it wasn't for some friends taking her in, she basically felt like, suicide was the only way out. I mean, it's sad. It
Yeah,
really is sad.
stories like
And,
that are really heartbreaking. And talking to some colleagues, some friends of mine about this, as it's been a relevant topic for us too over at Gentrio with elder fraud and how that pours into your estate plan. I feel like a lot of people have that mentality, like, oh, I don't need to learn more because I could recognize it when it's going to happen. Like, I don't have to worry about it. But again, it's growing into a $10 billion scam industry. So I just want to ask, how has it gotten that bad? And are they, these scammers, are they coming up with new innovative ways to scam people as well? Like, what does this industry look like that it's managed to become such a problem?
Oh, Jacob, I'll tell you this. When you look at, if it's a $10 billion industry, that's $10 billion they're making.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, God, if only some of us could have just 1 million of that. But if they're making that kind of money, think about then the kind of resources that they could purchase, or
Mm-hmm.
what they can do to become more sophisticated in how they get people, how they con people to turn over their money. For example, look at today, we have artificial intelligence. We're hearing about that. It's all over the news, right? AI, that's the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now one of the typical old-fashioned scams was the grandparent scam, where, an older grandparent, male, female, would get a phone call and they would hear a voice on the other end. And it would basically be, their little grandson, Johnny or Mary, saying that, crying, and they've been arrested and they're going to jail because they were in an auto accident and they hit this car and it was driven by a woman who happened to be pregnant, and they're going to be locked up. But don't tell anybody, don't tell my parents, but maybe, I'm going to put you on the line with a lawyer. And he said that maybe you could help me stop getting arrested and going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about it. With the artificial intelligence now, and with all the folks having video recordings on YouTube or wherever it is, all it takes for these con artists is to take a sample of that voice. And now when one of these older adults get a call for the grandparent scam, it actually sounds exactly like Johnny or
Mm-hmm.
Mary. I mean, and you see some stuff even going on in videos. where they could take a video that might have you in a compromising situation, and suddenly, that's been orchestrated through AI, and it's like, we have proof. Unless you pay us so much money, $10,000, we're going to send this out to all your friends. It's really, really scary.
Yeah,
But you hit on it earlier when you talked about it, because education, I mean, I've been doing this now about 7 years, 8 years. Education, we're told, is the best weapon we have in the fight against these scams and fraud. And I wish there was more. I wish I had better news about that, because a lot of times when folks lose their money, or they go and they buy these gift cards, and then they read the numbers to the con artists, and the con artists take the money, or now con artists are encouraging someone to, okay, the way you're going to make a payment, Jacob, we want you to go withdraw $5,000 from your bank, and then go to this ATM Bitcoin machine, a Bitcoin, and you deposit your money into that Bitcoin machine, and then you'll have the payment that way. Because with Bitcoin, they can't track it, they can't follow it. And it's the other thing I wanted to share on this is, I've done a lot of work with the Secret Service, the FBI, and law enforcement, and having them participate in a lot of these educational forums that I host. I've been told that there are these big warehouses over in Southeast Asia, that a lot of folks are there on the telephone conducting these scams all throughout the world. There are hundreds of them in a warehouse, and they're doing it from there. And a lot of these folks, sadly, are forced into doing this, which is very, very scary. So, I mean, this is the type of industry that has developed now, that really is constantly plaguing all of us in this country, both old and young alike, with these types of financial scams and fraud. So I just feel that we all need to be aware of them. We need to educate ourselves, because that is our best weapon to stay educated, and do whatever we can to prevent them. And the other sad part is, Jacob, it's even though you do all the education, when elder folk or a senior, Mary gets a phone call, and it's Johnny on the other end, and it sounds just like him. The con artist is getting that older senior, that senior adult, is getting them, wants to chart up their emotions and get them to act quickly without thinking. And that's how they prey on you. They prey on you to act fast. Don't think about it. Just move, do what I say, and make it happen. And they want to get your emotions all stirred up, because when that happens, you don't think you. That's why we always caution, and we tell older adults, when you're in those situations, stop, pause, never act quickly, never act out of fear, and think about it, and always, verify. Always verify what you're being told.
Yeah, and some of the conversations that I've been having, I've actually, and I'm sure I know you're more of an expert on this than I am, but I've found that when it comes to the different age ranges that have been targeted by scams, I tend to find that the older adults, it's more of an emotional attack, and then younger adults like me, I found that it's more of an attack through the disguise of authority. And by that I mean, that actually happened to me twice in the last week. I'll get a text message from a number I don't know, claiming to be, the full name of one of my bosses or executives above me at my company. And they'll say, I can't talk right now, I can't call, but I need you to, go get those gift cards or something for a client. So for me, someone who's an authority figure to me telling me that I need to go do something, I feel like for a younger person, that would kind of strike that same chord of, okay, I need to go get this done. I'm going to act quickly because I want to please my boss, versus an elder person who, like you said, gets that emotional attack, and then reacts too quickly and can be consumed by that kind of scam. Have you found kind of a similar pattern there?
Well, tell you, you're right on target with that, because that scam that you described is like one of the classics, where you get a call from, from your supervisor, your boss, saying, I can't do this right now, but I need you to like send money or whatever that might be. And again, it's one of the things where, well, maybe for that kind of thing, again, pause, stop, verify. Call your boss directly on another line or with a separate phone number that you might have, because don't forget too, and you know this, they spoof these phone numbers. So you could get your on your cell phone, you're looking and you're seeing the number comes up and it's like, oh, that's the phone number for my boss. What, and it's the site tied in with the text and with the instructions. And if you don't really stop and pause and consider what you're being asked to do, it could seem to be really legitimate. I mean, I saw stories too where you have people high ranking, that got caught up in the scams like that, where they sent millions of dollars or transferred millions of dollars, and it was all fraudulent. It becomes, Jacob, it really becomes overwhelming when you stop and think about it, that every little thing, it's like when it comes to finances or money associated with money, you always have to be questioned, pause, always verify. I think that becomes one of the basic precepts, I guess we should say, that we should really consider when it comes to fighting and protecting ourselves from scams and fraud.
No, I agree.
It's to verify, always verification.
I actually, when I first got started at Gentrio, I got one of those text messages saying it was my CEO, asking for $500 in gift cards to, I forget, it was like Google Play or one of those stores. And I did go and purchase the cards, but then I had that moment where I stopped, luckily enough, and verified, and I gave my CEO a call, and she was like, that's not me. So I didn't ever get to the point where I turned over the numbers, but I do now have, like $500 in credit to the Google store that I'm just using slowly over the years to watch movies. But yeah, and I always consider myself someone smart enough to not fall for a scam like that. But in the moment of starting a new job and having this authority figure who I wanted to impress, and them saying, I need you to do this right now for a client, it's important, this is your, your shot to show that you're loyal to the company, I fell right for it. So it can be a lot harder.
Yeah. I was going to say, any one of us can, and it's regardless of our background. I've seen stories where people, PhDs, highly educated people, lawyers, and they fell victim to a financial scam. And the other thing that happens here, you said earlier that it was reported that last year up to a little over $10 billion was lost in financial scams and fraud. Think of it. That's only what was reported.
Yeah.
There are countless folks that are scammed, that they've lost thousands, and they're embarrassed as hell to admit it. They think of it. Your older grandparents, they could lose money and in a scam. They could lose $5,000, $10,000. They're embarrassed to admit it to their grandchildren or their son or their daughter, because, geez, now they're going to take away my freedom, or they're going to, don't let me have access to my account anymore. And that becomes concerning. So it's also very important, not just to think about, the educational aspect of these are the different kind of scams. This is not what to do. But it's also so helpful for us to get a perspective from a gerontologist or a psychologist on, older adults and how your mind works and, what their fears are and how that comes into play. That's what these con artists take advantage of. They're looking at the psychological aspects of what it's like to be an older adult. And believe me, as you get older, I'm a senior. As you get older, you're going through different changes in your life where you start, looking ahead, and you only have so much money in your savings account, and this is what you're hoping to live on. You have to pay the doctor's bills and the taxes and everything else that's coming your way. And then you have a situation where, geez, you just lost $20,000 in the scam. And for some of these folks, they lose the whole thing. And can you mention the fear and how gut wrenching that is for some of those older adults? It's sad beyond belief. It really is.
Yeah. In your programs and these educational sessions that do you include material for those who may have already been affected by a scam and how to go about I don't know if there's any kind of response that you can do after having been scammed? Is there any educational material on that as well?
And there is a lot of the folks that we bring in. But what I like to do is with these educational forums, and obviously, is facilitate the discussion to raise awareness. So rather than me maybe doing what I'm doing now and giving you all of these examples, I have someone from the Secret Service, someone from the FBI,
Mm-hmm.
so that they all, can share their comments and their guidance based upon their organization as to, relative to these scams and fraud and how to stay safe. A lot of these organizations, like the Federal Trade Commission, they have a hotline there of where to call. You just have to visit their website at ftc.gov. And there's all kind of information and resources about scams and fraud, what to do if you are scammed. AARP has a great program. BankSafe, they have another issue with, what do I want to say? Not just the BankSafe, but they have a fraud awareness like hotline that you could subscribe to, so that you're constantly, if you get email, you're constantly kept updated about the different kind of scams.
Mm-hmm.
The resources are out there. The catch is to get everyone talking and to give these different organizations the opportunity to get in front of, the audience, to get in front of older adults, and also, Jacob, to get in front of younger folks as well too, because sometimes I don't know about your particular circumstances, but a lot of times you get younger folks that have an elderly grandparent or grandma, or sometimes even an elderly parent. And sometimes you feel responsible to protect them. You don't want to see them get scammed. So it's the education should not just be simply directed to an older adult. It also has to be made available to younger folks so that it gives them the tools and the resources of how to protect their loved ones who are much older in age.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you brought up, some of these federal resources. I was going to ask if there was any sort of federal response to this, but it's good to know that they have these resources out there. And like we've been saying all along, I think the number one thing is education and making sure that people just understand what the world can really be like for these scammers and how to avoid it and how to see the signs. And I do want to ask, let's talk about what are some of kind of the common forms that these scams can take. And you had mentioned earlier someone physically walking into a bank and being uh persuaded to do so and withdraw money by a scammer. Is that the most common type? Are there more common non-physical versions that you could see out there? I just want to get an understanding for our audience of what some of these scams can look like and how different they could possibly be.
Sure thing. There's, I guess I kind of maybe divide it up into scams that occur on telephone
Mm-hmm.
and online and then in the family. And with a lot of telephone scams, I mean, this goes back to, back in the early days where you get a call from the IRS, and it's basically a recorded message saying that, you owe money in taxes, and if you don't pay, you're going to be arrested. Call this number now to, settle your account.
Mm-hmm.
First, the IRS doesn't call folks, to say that you owe money in your taxes. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, that was something my dad always told me when because I used to get those back
Yeah.
when I worked for political campaigns. He would always tell me that if you're in trouble with the IRS, they'll send you a letter, not call you. So I kept that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get those calls. I mean, like on your cell phone, or you get the call, like we were saying before, the grandparent scam, where an older folk gets a call that their grandchild, was arrested, that kind of thing. Sometimes you'll get the other scary thing now is, we just had that big hurricane that went through Florida and down into Appalachia. Well, when disasters occur, a lot of these con artists, get a load of this, these con artists will prey on people. We're calling to collect for all the victims of the hurricane in North Carolina. Would you kindly make a donation to help us, to help these needy people? It's these people are just, what's going on, how they're suffering, and the con artists are preying on that and using that to scam folks, really legitimate, folks from their money. And over a telephone call. A lot of times you'll see that if there's, in your community, if there's a fire or something, that you'll get a phone call that they're collecting for the victims of the fire or for the police association, the benevolent association, that sort of thing. It's really to be avoided. If one wants to give a donation to something like that, just hang up and call directly to the local police department or fire department, whatever it might be. The other one is scams that occur online. And a lot of times we see that from romance scams, where someone's feeling lonely. They might go on a website and start up a conversation with someone, and then that leads to eventually that person asking for money. Or a very typical one is you're on your computer, and all of a sudden the screen pops up and says your computer has been infected with a virus. Click the button here, and so that we can connect and help get rid of that virus. And then I know people that have been victims of that scam. They click that button, someone then connects with them on their laptop and basically says, well, if you put this credit card information in, we'll get onto your computer and we can get rid of the virus for you and save your bank accounts and all your precious information. The person falls for it. Well, guess what? They're now linked into your computer and they're looking for all your passwords, all your, any kind of identity information that you have. And next thing you know, your bank accounts are emptied. So that we have to be careful with that online stuff. But the biggest and scariest of them all is more than, we talk about all these scams occurring. The vast majority of these scams occur by someone in the family. That is absolutely, just beyond belief.
I was going to ask because, that ties into what I see a lot working for Gentrio, being an estate planning company, is I was going to ask if in these educational sessions you include scams that, the unfortunate fact is the scammer is a loved one, someone within the family.
That's right. And think of it, a lot of times you get a situation where, the grandchild or even a son or daughter, they need money for drugs. Maybe they have a problem. And, they have very easy access into, their parents' accounts or the grandparents' accounts because they might be taking care of them. And they get that access and they start training money. Well, mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, they're very reluctant to report little Johnny because it's, we don't want to get him arrested. We don't want him to go to jail for ripping us off. And they become exploited along those lines. And that is something that really, is difficult to deal with. You see stories about, someone has, that you have an older couple, and next thing you know, they're being thrown out of their house because their son is selling their house behind their back because a couple of years earlier they signed a power of attorney over to that child. So while it becomes so important for us to be mindful of scams and fraud, it also comes down to, and particularly this I think applies when we talk about Gentrio and a lot of the services it provides. Even like that, for power of attorney, it's so important that individuals, older folks, older adults, that if you appoint someone and give them power of attorney, that you really do your homework and really appoint someone that you can trust, that will not do something like that to you in the end. It's you have to do the best that you can. You really do.
I agree. And I think additionally, one of the reasons, again, I'm biased because I work here, and but I really do believe in the product that we have. I think one of the tools that companies like Gentry allow you to access is that accessibility by multiple parties. So in a lot of the traditional estate planning cases where we see elder abuse or fraud, um, it's a situation where people just don't know. You could have, the grandparent with one child who really cares for them truly and is trying to look out for their best interest, but maybe another child who uh, has been abusing and trying to basically con them out of their estate. But with a tool like Gentro, where you can have multiple people have easy access to, the will, the understanding who the executors are, the powers of attorney or healthcare proxies, etc. It just offers that much more ability for someone to step in and say, "Hey, I don't know if this is the best idea. Let's all talk about it. Let's all be on the same page about things." And I find that tends to be a really great first line of defense, is just everyone being on the same page, because hopefully someone will speak up and say, I don't think this situation is the right one at the moment, and you can help to prevent some potential disastrous scenarios down the line.
You're absolutely right, and that's one of the things I like about Gentrio, because I kind of refer to it as like layers of defense.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at scams and fraud, education's one aspect, but I've come to see and learn from all this work I've been doing that providing that education, unfortunately, is not enough. We need to do more, and that more is providing hands-on tools and resources to families, to older adults, so that they can become even more engaged in protecting themselves. And one of those tools is Gentrio, is having access to to have those documentations, to provide and tap into the services that Gentrio provides, because it does give, it's like a firewall.
Mm-hmm.
It thickens the firewall to mitigate, the possibility of scams. The more we can do to create a larger and stronger defensive firewall, the better we're all going to be.
So we've established, that for the individual, education is key. Going to sessions like this, understanding what the risks are, the identifiers, that's your first and foremost line of defense. But in terms of the credit unions and other financial institutions, how do they tie in to helping protect the individuals, the credit union members? How do they tie into this education, and what can they do to protect their members and other potential individuals who might be a part of their institution or other institutions?
Well, I think it's basically simple. I think we know that education is the best tool. So we all, banks, credit unions, anyone that's in any kind of an organization, it could be a senior center. Well, line someone up to come in and talk about this, to educate the audiences. It's so very important that we keep reminding folks about the different scams and fraud, and particularly push that message out about stop and verify. Don't act out of haste. Don't be pushed into it. That's what we get. And the other thing too is, the reason I say that is that we have to do this over and over and over, because studies have shown that you have to tell someone up to 7 times that message before it finally sinks in, before it takes hold. So you just can't tell somebody something once and think, okay, it's done now. They're going to remember this for the rest of their lives. We don't need to do anything again. Well, guess what? That didn't sink in. Someone needs this. Human nature. It's just the way we're made. We need to hear this at least 7 times before it sinks in. And particularly too, when you think about it, Jacob, how these con artists are becoming more sophisticated in how they're scamming folks. It's constantly changing, it's evolving, and it's growing. So you can't just talk about scams today and then think it's all said and done, because 2 weeks, a month, a year from now, there's going to be all these new kind of ways that they're scamming folks because of the sophistication. And we need to educate folks about that as well, too. So this is an ongoing, as I see it, an ongoing initiative that organizations that are associated with an individual's finances, savings, or let's say groups that take care of, like at a senior center or a veterans, VFW hall or whatever that might be. We need to be focused on what are we doing to help protect those that are with us from becoming victims of a scam and a fraud. So that education needs to continue. Secondly, the other aspect of it are the tools. And I believe it's very, very important that the same organizations not only do the education, but they provide the necessary hands-on tools to those around them so that those folks can become more, what do we want to say, take more of an initiative to really protect themselves and do what needs to be done. And it's tools like Gentrio, to make sure that all their documentation, their wills, their power of attorney, all of that is completed and it's on record and you're tied in with it. There are other organizations now that are doing these financial apps that you could tap into that as well, that alert folks so that we're always staying ahead of the game to protect folks from losing their money. So I think the combination, the hands-on tools, the education needs to continue.
Mm-hmm. And as we said at the beginning of this episode, your website, laskoscommunications.com, that has tons of resources on this, correct?
That's right. My website, I have listed a lot of the work and services I provide on it, what I've done in the past, and I'm certainly open and willing to help anyone that's listening to help them help others. I often say that, and I tell audiences when I'm in front of them on this to be a good Samaritan. It's not, you don't just want to come soak up the information and then use it to protect yourself from becoming a victim of a scam or fraud, but you want to find others that might be a shut-in or someone who did not hear the information and share with them what you've learned, what you've heard here, so that you might be able to maybe help them and protect them from losing tens of thousands of dollars. And just think how good that will make you feel if you share that information and find out that you helped protect them from losing that amount of money. Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful thing to do. And I think, again, it comes maybe with that old cliche, it takes a community. Maybe it really does. Maybe it's, looking to all of us working together to protect one another from such, from all these kind of scams and fraud that are targeting us.
Mm-hmm. And as we said, education is the first step. And, I think to end on a good note, the good news is that at least these things are preventable. And it's good to know that things are being done to minimize the amount of effect that these kind of scams can have. And again, it's good to know that with the right amount of education and hopefully expanding the work that people like you are doing to reach communities and offer that education, that these things can be prevented.
That's right, and let's keep our fingers crossed that I think folks really heed the message, take it to heart, and realize that this isn't going away. Mm-hmm. These, if it's $10 billion last year, count on it being 15, 18, 20 billion this year in 2024, and if it continues to grow, where's it going to end? Unless we do what we need to do, those of us in the position to take action, unless we take that action, these con artists are just, it's like picking fruit off the tree. It's right there for them, and they're going to continue to go for it, taking candy from a baby. Mm-hmm. So let's stop them. Let's all work together and make this happen.
I agree. Hopefully in the next few years, we can see the numbers start to decrease. But Walt, I really appreciate you coming on and informing us about this. Again, for everyone listening, you can learn more at laskoscommunications.com, where Walt has provided tons of additional details, backgrounds, and services. So make sure you go check that out. And Walt, again, thank you so much for being on, and I look forward to having you back so we can discuss, when things start to look better in this scam industry. I'm looking forward to having you back so we can talk about additional things being done.
And I'll look forward to that opportunity as well, Jacob. Thanks for having me today.
All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in. Again, my name is Jacob Murphy, your host as always, and we will see you next time.